Calling Trustee Landsberger. Calling Trustee Landsberger. Come in, Trustee Landsberger. Calling this meeting to order. Let's do the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Welcome to the study session. We received one public comment via email. Appreciated that. And I do not have cards for any others. So I'm going to hand it off to Chancellor Lambert.
Well, thank you, Madam President, and well, good evening, everybody. And thank you for joining us on a very important conversation we want to have with the board this evening about basic aid and the transition that we're moving through. So I thought I'd just start out with some introductory remarks and then turn it over to Vice Chancellor Momjian. We're starting this conversation from a good position of strength. I want us not to lose sight of that. We're fiscally stable, we're highly regarded and supported by one of the strongest local economies in the nation. Our transition to community supported status is the result of California's funding formula. As local revenues have exceeded our state apportionment calculations, we have crossed that threshold into basic aid. What matters now is how we steward this opportunity through continued sound fiscal stewardship, strategic alignment, and an unwavering commitment to equity, student success, and serving the educational workforce needs of our region. So we can ensure that Foothill-De remains a vibrant and resilient college district. So this transition is not to change the important work already underway. The blueprint for success at Foothill, the strategic planning work that's been happening at De Anza, and the work we've been doing here on strategic priorities, none of that has to change because of this transition. If anything, it just gives it even more importance as we go forward. So tonight is not about making operational decisions. It's about establishing the principles and the parameters that will guide our planning over what I like to posit to the board the next 5 years. So with that, I'm going to turn it over.
Thank you, Chancellor. So good evening. I'm looking forward to the conversation. At the outset, I'd like to acknowledge that this presentation and the extensive data packet before you are the result of deep collaborative work. I want to extend sincere thanks to everyone who contributed to our approach and development of today's presentation, including our dedicated constituent leaders through the beginnings of informal conversations, our full executive leadership team. And I particularly want to thank the interim executive director of institutional research and planning, Dr. Mallory Newell, and support of the college directors, Lisa Lee and Elaine Kuo, whose rigorous data analysis grounds this presentation. And of course, Vice Chancellor De La Rosa and his team for the various trend analyses you saw in the data packet. Before diving into the discussion, I think it's important to explicitly acknowledge the psychological or emotional impact of this moment and transition. For decades, our collective institutional mindset has equated enrollment growth with fiscal stability. Moving away from that model creates a natural sense of uncertainty or even institutional grieving, as the fundamental rules we operated under are now changing. As the Chancellor mentioned, we are in the fortunate position and have been given an extraordinary gift, the gift of time to design our future and plan. To ground our dialogue, as I mentioned, you've been provided with an extensive data packet. The data acts as our diagnostic lens. The data provides an objective view of the demographic realities of our region, so we can plan and discuss options rooted in clear evidence. So what we're asking of the board tonight in this discussion is high-level policy guidance on a 5-year plan and discussion to establish the planning parameters for the future. These are the interests and governing conditions that will help map our design journey. The district has been preparing for this transition. It didn't just happen by accident. I'd like to emphasize that our foundational values, our institutional practices, and our core strategic vision and priority areas are not changing. Our district campus and campuses remain locked on access, equity, and success. The district remains grounded in creating educational opportunities for our students and opportunities to support their social economic mobility. The district has been proactive, and we thank you. We're grateful for your leadership in creating, being proactive and responding to regional pressures noted in the Silicon Valley Data Index. For example, our employee and student housing initiatives directly target the local hyperinflation, where the median single-family home reached $1.98 million and left only 25% of first-time buyers able to afford a home in the region in 2025. Furthermore, our forward-thinking Measure G infrastructure bonds ensure that our physical and technological footprint matches long-term student expectations. Moving to community-supported status gives us a more resilient mechanism to safeguard these existing commitments. I'm going to turn it over to Vice Chancellor De La Rosa to speak on the fiscal pivot that we're making.
Thank you, Vice Chancellor Momjan. Good afternoon, everybody. So this slide in front of you tonight summarizes the fundamental fiscal realities of our transition to a community-supported status. Our base operating revenue is shifting away from dependence on state apportionment and enrollment targets toward a more predictable stream of locally generated property taxes and enrollment fees. However, I just want to emphasize that this shift does not mean enrollment is no longer important. Enrollment is and will remain central to our mission, and significant categorical funding, particularly for Student Equity and Achievement Program and the Strong Workforce Programs, continues to be influenced by the state's student-centered funding formula metrics. At the same time, predictable revenue does not necessarily mean that revenue will keep pace with our costs. Health benefits, pensions, inflation, compensation, utilities, and other operating expenses are expected to increase year over year. Also worth noting is our non-resident and international student program. This is an important strategic lever. It strengthens the global leadership environment for all of our students, promotes global citizenship, and generates flexible discretionary revenue that supports our core mission. So the bottom line is we must plan to align ongoing costs with sustainable revenues so that by year 5, the district remains financially stable with greater intentionality and is fully capable of advancing our mission.
So we focused on demographic and socioeconomic data in the packet to help reflect on the needs of the community. And the data from Silicon Valley Index is based primarily on Santa Clara and San Mateo counties, and some data points include San Francisco, Alameda, and Santa Cruz counties. Your packet also highlights specific data findings to our initial questions to better understand who our students are, where they're coming from, what they want from us, and how well we're serving them. We also included fiscal and enrollment trends, as well as overlaid staffing trends to inform the discussion. And I'm only going to highlight a few concepts and data points in this presentation. You've got the full 50-page packet there. So let me first just speak of the demographic challenge. At a most basic and fundamental level, we need to underscore this stark local reality of falling birth rates and high living costs that are basically creating a student vacuum within the immediate district borders. And throughout this presentation, when we talk about in-district or taxing borders, it's your, the trustee elected boundary areas. Everything else is outside. So the Silicon Valley Index data shows a profound shift between 2014 and 2024 within Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. The population aged 65 and over has grown by 29%, while the population under 18 has declined by 15%. I was just struck by the details in the historical birth rates in the valley, which have plummeted from 17 births per 1,000 residents in the early 1990s to just 9 or 10 births per 1,000 more recently. So our local tax-paying geographical boundary is rapidly aging out of traditional college-going years. This seems to indicate to maintain regional impact and institutional scale, we must look beyond our rigid geographic boundaries. Thinking about who we serve and where our students come from, it's very clear that Foothill-De Anza functions fundamentally as a regional hub for social mobility, drawing students far beyond our immediate taxing area. The district-wide data reveals that 68% of our current student body lives outside our immediate service area, leaving only 32% residing within our taxing boundaries. In the data packet, we included more details on those students where they're coming from. Probably no surprise to those of you here that there's a higher proportion of students who identify as Asian, Black, Filipino, Latinx residing outside the service area. And students from outside the district boundaries exhibit higher rates of being low income. So 23% are low income outside the district, 7% within district. When we look at our Pell recipients, it's 6% outside the district, 3% from within the district. So the dilemma through our informal conversations and aha moments revolve around this paradox that our educational footprint and our mission, it's wide, it's diverse, it's socioeconomically high need, while our funding mechanism is now mostly local. How do we align local tax stewardship with the mandate to serve a regional workforce and student base? To me, that's just, it's a big question. How do we balance revenue received as a community-supported district with our mandate to serve this broader Silicon Valley educational and workforce ecosystem? So since our mission includes workforce training, we included a few data points here related to career and technical education. And we found that career and technical education comprises 34%, over a third of our total district enrollment. We're the premier vocational training engine for the region's infrastructure, regardless of zip code. It's important to note that of that 1/3, of that 34%, 24% of all career and tech students commute from outside our district borders. When you look at the top regional occupations that's listed in the Silicon Valley Index data, we rely regionally on approximately 30,000 construction specialists and managers, alongside tens and thousands of workers in healthcare, nursing. We have over 80 career tech programs offered in our district. Looking at this data, for me, the bottom line is that our programs are supplying the skilled, highly skilled labor force that keeps the regional economy running. And it's clear that if we restricted our focus purely to local zip codes, that would stifle the talent pipeline. It would be devastating. So we're considering a 5-year timeline for planning. And you might ask why 5 years? This time frame is intentionally selected because it aligns with our established strategic planning cycles. It allows us to match our fiscal modeling with our long-term institutional goals. We need an intentional pace of change to provide organizational coherence to the changes that get planned and rolled out while maintaining continuity and strong, productive engagement with our leadership groups and all employees who are here to serve our mission. So with that, here's a suggested phased milestone over 5 years. Year 1 is the 26-27 academic year that we're going into. We hope to gather board guidance and establish some high-level policy parameters. This will help guide our conversations to develop options, identify some opportunities and potential solutions. Years 2 to 4 are where we can systematically operationalize and scale some of those fiscal and instructional adjustments. Once we have that plan, we can operationalize in those years 2 to 4 with the goal of in year 5, we'll have attained a stabilized, resilient financial state with secure regional footprint. The thought is that the 5-year window provides a steady glide path to build an agile institution that can continuously learn, adapt, and respond as the conditions change. The questions and the slides that follow, including the interest and governing conditions, I just wanted to let you know is also on this discussion sheet summarized here for a conversation later. And on one side is also the mission, just for reference. So the focus of our conversation is basically this question: in a community-supported environment, how should we balance stewardship of locally generated resources with our responsibility to serve the broader educational, workforce, and civic needs of the communities that depend on us? It's fundamental to state that our decision-making framework, it's entirely interest-based. We're not looking at this as a zero-sum exercise. It's a method that requires the district to balance deeply held institutional interests against concrete governing conditions. And so these interests are the underlying motivations, the needs, the concerns. We don't want to focus necessarily on the what right now, more the why. What are the core reasons that we exist and what we want to accomplish? So on the slide, it's not an exhaustive list of potential interests, but it's a starting place for our conversations as we think about how we balance meeting the district and college mission, achieving equitable student outcomes, ensuring social and economic mobility, fulfilling students' basic needs, becoming an employer of choice, and public accountability and transparency. We're going to need to hear some of your thoughts on these. What are we missing? What's most important to you as a board? Chris is going to speak a little bit about the parameters, the governing conditions, and what else needs to be considered.
So as the board considers the interest we want to advance, we also need to recognize the governing conditions that shape our choices. So just a reminder, governing conditions are the legal, regulatory, policy, and financial requirements within which the district must make its decisions. This establishes the boundaries we must honor while determining the best path forward. So becoming community supported gives the district greater local responsibility and flexibility at the same time, but it does not remove the requirements that apply to California community colleges. One example or two of those examples are the 50% law and the faculty obligation number will continue to influence how we allocate resources and plan our staffing. So just a reminder, 50% law is basically saying that at least 50% of all total unrestricted general fund expenditures must be spent in the classroom instruction. And then the faculty obligation number, which is under California Code of Regulations Title V, determines the minimum number of full-time faculty a district must have teaching credit courses every year. Other pieces are the reserve management and the stability fund strategies, which remain essential because they help us absorb volatility, manage transitions, and protect the mission during periods of uncertainty. If you may recall, under our current board policy, it states that 5% of our unrestricted general fund revenues should be our reserve fund. However, FICMAT, or the Fiscal Crisis and Management Assistance Team, also requires 5% reserve fund as a fiscal health benchmark, while the California Community Colleges Chancellor's Office recommends 16.67% fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. Just note that all of these percentages does not factor basic aid districts that are more exposed towards property tax timing and volatility, and also, in our particular case, non-resident tuition variability. So non-resident enrollment and revenue are also important considerations. They provide both educational value and flexible revenue, but they must be managed strategically and cannot be viewed as a guaranteed or an unlimited resource. And we've experienced that swing already in the later part of the 2018, 2019, and then just recently again. Finally, all decisions must remain consistent with the board's policies, state regulations, collective bargaining obligations, and other legal and regulatory requirements. These conditions are not intended to limit strategic thinking. They are just guardrails that help ensure our decisions are responsible, compliant, transparent, and sustainable. The goal of this framework is to balance what we want to accomplish with the conditions we must honor as we plan for the district's long-term future. And once we receive your direction, we will engage with our constituent leadership and campus groups to operationalize the board's vision and direction across the district.
Thank you, Chris. So as we conclude this presentation, I invite you to take a look at the handout, which summarizes the big questions, summarizes the interest and governing conditions we just briefly referenced right now, and where we need board guidance as we make this mental shift and plan for the long-term well-being of the district. On the back side of the handout is the mission, because I didn't include it in this presentation, but I did not want to lose sight of what our mission is. So it's there as a quick reminder. As we move forward in this work, there's 3 questions, 3 areas that we invite you to provide guidance on, as well as any questions you have. One is to affirm the planning horizon as aligned with our strategic cycles. 2 is to articulate the board interests regarding local stewardship versus regional mission fulfillment. And 3 is to confirm the governing conditions and fiscal safety guardrails that we will use moving forward. So with that, thank you very much. And we open the floor to your questions and guidance.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And particularly thank you to all the data wonks who got in here and did all this hard data. So a lot of word problems in here. So thank you for the reminder that, that this is hard work and it helps inform what we're doing. Okay, board colleagues, I know we have some questions. Trustee Landsberger, I see a light.
Well, first of all, thank you for the introduction, which was clear and concise, and I think provides valuable structure. And I hope we're able to take these expected outcomes maybe one at a time. But before we get into conversation, I would very much like to hear at least preliminary thoughts or reactions from our constituent groups, particularly our academic senate leadership, because you know, before I feel I can come to clearer and more firm orientation towards these outcomes, I'd like to be informed by what they have to say if they're prepared to speak.
And let me ask my colleagues if that works for the rest of you. Is that all right? Does that work? Okay.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm excited. I'm really excited. And, you know, but I also have to recognize a lot of the other emotions that my colleagues are probably feeling, which is fear, anxiety, and perhaps even loss. When we think about change, all these emotions can land on people very differently. And I really appreciate like, the 5-year timeline that we're looking at and really looking at the next year with a lot of intention and how we could do this right. And I think that's really important. You know, as we move through this work, I do want to be cognizant of the initiative burnout. So I'm speaking at Foothill College specifically. A lot of things have happened on our campus, with changes in leadership, accreditation, and then we have strategic planning locally with our Blueprint for Success, and then we also have the district strategic planning. So with a lot of these things going around on our campus, it may seem like, well, there's so many things going on. And I think what's important that we align a lot of this work. Because, when I looked at like, the interest to advance that list, is like, we're already doing that work. So is there a way to kind of align that work so it doesn't look like we're doing extra work? Because I could see all my faculty in doing all that work. And if we give the label, oh, we're working on this basic aid, it's like, no. This aligns with what we've already been planning with our Blueprint for Success. So as I go into Blueprint for Success into year 2, it's like, okay, how can I, as the leadership of Academic Senate, align this work so it doesn't look like it's taxing on our faculty? Because I think that's the biggest challenge in our last Academic Senate meeting that faculty were raising. Is like, seems like there's so much going on. And so I just want to be careful as we proceed with this work that we align this work and making sure that we're keeping mission aligned, at least at the college. That's also part of the work. So there isn't like mission creep, like there's other things that are coming into that. It essentially, it can't look like extra work. I really want to have our faculty engaged in the work, and just throwing in extra work may seem a little daunting for them. And so again, that's one thing I really want to underscore as we proceed with this work, is that a lot of our faculty are excited. I would say most of our faculty are excited. They're just kind of like rubbing their hands and like, okay, what can we do? But at the same time, it's like, well, what am I getting myself into? And so as we proceed with this work, let's think intentionally in how it might land on our rank and file, both full-time and part-time faculty. That's all I have. Thank you.
Good evening. Good to see you all. So as you know, I've been out on PDL this quarter, so I've missed some of the more recent developments at De Anza, but I touched base with Shagan, who I think's been working with you guys last year. You remember her, right? Okay, good. So I had a chance to touch base with her, and we had some conversations about this. And by way of initial remarks, I can echo broadly a lot of what Voltaire just shared, that there's both some excitement in terms of the opportunities that moving into a basic aid community funded framework presents to us, and also a fair bit of trepidation about what that could mean and how it could impact particular programs. I think there's excitement because there are some fundamental shifts. We're moving from a system where, for as long as I've been with the district, we've had a really singular focus on enrollment growth. How do we get more? And even more than that, we've had a focus on increasing productivity, right? How do we get a whole lot of enrollment growth, but how do we do it? How do we do more with less, right? I see Chris is like, yes, right? So that's been a really big focus. And I think that in pursuit of that, there were a number of decisions made and compromises that seemed really important and critical at the time that faculty are going to look at now and say, okay, well, those were some things that we did when we said, well, this was really important. Well, that enrollment pressure's off. So now do we go back to a place that might serve our students better, right? Because instead of focusing on enrollment growth, are we going to get to instead to focus on how do we practice equity better in the classroom? How do we improve persistence? How do we meaningfully improve success? So it's not about how many students we have in the class, but it's about the success of the students that we have there already. Of course, like I said, the concerns about the impact, though, persist, right? As we move into a scenario where we're not necessarily chasing enrollment growth, there is some concern about enrollment fall off. That's the trend that we've seen happening, and particularly what does that mean for our smaller programs? There's some very real concern that as we move into this process, that there's going to be an increased pressure on some of these smaller programs to perhaps consolidate across the district, or perhaps face program elimination, if not significant changes in how they're offered. So that's sort of the framing that I give for some of my initial thoughts. Excitement, trepidation, going hand in hand. There's a lot going on at De Anza right now. And you're aware that, I'm very thankful that we've got our interim president, Kuhn here, but, we've got a leadership transition that's been going on that is just one in a series of leadership transitions. I was talking to somebody in my department, and how many presidents over 6 years? So it's been a lot. And this adds to that cognitive load, right? So as we talk about these big shifts in strategic direction, without a steady hand at the tiller, so to speak, it's an extra burden for the faculty and the leadership of all the different constituent groups on campus. And I ask you to consider and bear that in mind as we move forward in terms of how we both discuss it and implement any decisions we come to.
Can I add on to it?
Yes.
Okay.
Please do.
So Classified Senate, I'm here on behalf of Foothill, but I'm also here on behalf of De Anza, as I don't have my counterpart here today, but I want to represent our voice as well. I just want to share that along the lines of our academic Senate colleagues, although there is excitement for possible opportunity, there is a lot of question and fatigue that Voltaire mentioned on behalf of the classified colleagues of ours. I do want to just highlight the fact that as much as it may impact in the classroom and all of that, we need to be just as conscious regarding how it ripples into all of our outside of class services and supports. So, which is the majority of the time that students are on campus, is they're on our campus for various other things besides class, right? So making sure that there is the same level of attention and mindfulness when it comes to addressing how these basic aid timelines and changes impact all of our services that support students to make sure they're ready and set to go for class. So I'm talking about all of our operational, all of our classified staff, but just anything outside of the classroom. But sometimes folks forget that we also support inside of the classroom. And so we serve different functions. And so I think really understanding what the functions that classified professionals play into a student's experience on our campuses would be important to be clear as we move forward with this, because I do feel like there's great opportunity, but there has been great opportunity in the past as well, and we still are recovering from not being included in a lot of those changes. One of the examples we often are still struggling with is coming back from the pandemic. We also are working hybrid services, and that's something we're still grappling with because we weren't really directed, right? We're just kind of, okay, let's do this. Let's put it together and a little bit of a reactionary way versus being prepared and planned. And so I feel like this is another opportunity for us to, as a district, make sure we're including our staff and faculty together at the same level when we have these conversations and we move this work forward, because I do feel like there's still a lot of trauma that has been left from previous changes. And this is a good opportunity to do some more repairing. And so working collectively with our academic senate, classified senate, I think is a great opportunity for us to come together. But I do feel like I just want to raise the fact that, it would be great to be considered at the same level. And I just also want to thank Gohar. And you've been really engaging with us throughout this last year on behalf of classified, but I would like for that to continue when it comes to these big changes, right? So inviting us to be in the same spaces is going to be very critical. And so that's the only thing I'd like to share, is that we're excited to be part of this work, but we would like to continue to be, considered at the same level as our academic senate counterparts, because we work together every day. And so it's the same thing when it comes to these larger initiatives. And as we've continued to work together, we've realized how powerful it is for us to come together, and how the various levels of educators that exist on our campuses need to be talking. And this is a great opportunity for that. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to bounce back over to Dolores.
Hi. I'm going to figure out how to use this mic at our last meeting, and that's fine. I want to echo and reiterate a little bit of what Voltaire and Eric in particular have already said. There is a lot of excitement that I've heard district-wide. There is also I hesitate to use the word fear because I'm concluding teaching women's studies this quarter, and it has different meanings when you use that in different contexts, but there is a certain amount of hesitation and concern that we have in the past had a tendency to move very quickly when we start initiatives, too quickly. And we don't take time to hear from constituents, to hear from how our students are doing, to hear what's happening. And all of a sudden we are underwater with something that we've decided to do, and no one seems to know how to get out from under the water. I am not urging us to go slowly. Chancellor Lambert and I had a conversation, I think it was last week, and he said, well, we'll go as slowly as the faculty need us to go. And I was like, oh God, don't do that, because it will take us 20 years to get things done. My colleagues and we're used to deliberative processes. That's what we do in the academic senate. We don't make snap decisions. And it was one of the hardest things for me to realize when I started representing all of my colleagues, was that moving in a field like CTE, where you have to move very quickly, is not the same as a historian who can take her time getting things done. So I would urge us to pay attention to that sort of warning, not to go too quickly. I know that there is excitement about the amount of money that potentially will be available. There's excitement about the potential of, we've already heard, reducing class sizes. But I will tell you that already people are saying, oh, they're all going to be reduced, and they're all going to be reduced permanently. And as I'm sure my union colleague can point out, no, that is not the agreement. We are not reducing every single course by a percentage or something like that. So I think that there is a lot of excitement. I've heard it on both campuses. I've heard it in a variety of different district meetings. And I also, like Vanessa, want to reiterate that Vice Chancellor Momjian has been amazing about bringing this information. We got to see her presentation at the Foothill Senate with Mallory Newell, and it was great and understandable. And quite frankly, as someone who fully acknowledges that the budgetary stuff is not my greatest strength, I am deeply appreciative of having folks on this dais and behind us that support us and make it as clear as semi-translucent mud, as opposed to just the usual muddiness that is the budget. So thank you. And I will turn it over to my colleague.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Jim Nguyen. I'm representing Faculty Association, if I haven't had a chance to meet you yet. Thanks for allowing me to speak on behalf of FA. I've had a little bit of time to think about this over the last week, so I've prepared some comments. So if you'll permit me, I'll read from that. And I wanted to share a few thoughts from FA's perspective. Basic aid gives us an opportunity to ask a different question than we've asked for many years. For a long time, state funding incentives shaped many of our decisions. Now we have more flexibility to think strategically about who we serve, how we serve them, and what kind of institution we want to be. I'm glad we're starting this conversation. I hope we also think seriously about sustainability. Faculty have taken on more and more responsibilities outside the classroom, from accreditation, compliance, assessment, governance, student support. Much of that work is important, but it also takes time away from teaching and mentoring students. At the same time, when employees retire or leave, we don't always replace them. The work remains. Student needs remain, but fewer people are available to do the work. We see the effects in burnout, declining morale, and reduced capacity. If we're serious about student success, we need to be equally serious about supporting the people who make that success possible. In one of the most expensive regions in the country, we should be asking what it takes to become an employer of choice and retain great faculty and staff. Basic aid also gives us an opportunity to be more intentional about how we serve students. We can't continue to be everything to everyone. We should think carefully about who we are best positioned to serve, the right balance between online and in-person instruction, and how we invest our limited resources. I've seen some of the most transformative work happen when faculty, staff, counselors, and student support programs come together to support the whole student holistically, especially those facing the greatest barriers. Those successes don't happen by accident. They happen when institutions invest in people. Finally, I hope we remain mindful of the 50% law and the faculty obligation number, or FON, as we make future investments. Our mission is ultimately delivered through instruction and direct student support. Basic aid gives us an opportunity to build a stronger, more sustainable district. My hope is that we use that opportunity to invest in students, in our employees, and in the quality of education we provide.
Is there any opportunity we could get a copy of those statements? That is a great statement.
It looks like it's written down.
Yeah,
So
if you could
perhaps-
send us,
I'd be happy to.
please.
Thanks. Scott or Elaine?
Oh, thank you. So for ACE, I am CWID 11250-864. I represent 400 line items on the budget. And that's something that I'm afraid of, is that throughout this discussion, we will become just line items on a budget that will be seen as liabilities instead of assets. So I do hope that as we move through this, we recognize that people can be retrained strategically. So if there are operational needs that are determined, we can continue to transfer folks where we see fit. I will say that the most difficult part of leadership is that everybody wants to be a leader until you have to be a leader. And so there are times when we look at you and we expect leadership. I know the title is trustee, administrator, executive administrator, president, but the job is leadership. And so I think that's one thing that makes my folks very nervous, is we just don't know what's to come because we haven't seen an example of the future, any kind of roadmap or what our intentions are. So I think this conversation about developing that will be crucial. Part of that includes a staffing study. So Teamsters as well as CSEA has talked about this. So we've talked about just overwork. Staff are given many programs. In a space we often ask, like, why do we have so many program coordinators? It's a broad classification and a lot of work can be put into it. But throughout this process, just again, the most important thing I think to us, and it's an odd one because again, I'm here for the wages, working conditions, and benefits, but a lot of these folks are products of the system. Whether they went to Foothill-De or a neighboring community college, they made a choice to give their time, their effort, their work to this system. And seeing it diminished or seeing numbers reduced, I don't think is going to play well with my folks. I think it's going to lead to that climate issue. It's not something I'm here for either. So I think the messaging, as you develop it, needs to be more about how we're going to provide high quality services to who we can, not so much about providing to a reduced number. Because that reduction piece, again, that's a word that I don't think anybody wants. Even, faculty, while they have been pushed to have these large class sizes, I understand that there's a burden. My folks are also pushed to support large communities, but they do so and they continue to do so out of love and care. Almost sometimes, again, my message to them on Professional Development Day was, you're all too nice. You don't report your overtime. You continue working after hours. You email at all hours. If they were really interested in, just being making money, they would go somewhere else. But I think they're interested in working for this college. And so as a part of that, reflecting the contribution of classified staff, maintaining classified Senate and engaging with classified folks as a part of these discussions is essential. So thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am here on behalf of Teamsters, and I would just say that I do echo my labor colleague here in terms of some of the concerns regarding sort of where the next sort of chapter in terms of how Foothill-De seeks to serve students and serves them well. I would sort of start with my ask of the board in terms of thinking about what is a unified communication strategy as you move forward. I know what's been put towards you is sort of providing some guidance and et cetera, which yes, you need to do that too. But to then provide that guidance about what is the unified communication strategy. I think for labor, this is a sort of, we really don't want a mean girl situation here in terms of where somebody starts something and we have 3 different locations, word travels fast, the telephone game is real, and to have a consistent communication message and strategy as we go through the next 5 years. I like to think of this as strategic shrinking within our district that is mission aligned. That is what I've been trying to tell my members, that we are not shrinking just to shrink. We are not serving students who have always been a priority for our district, but we are doing it and reevaluating in terms of how it is aligned with our mission. And my messaging has been that instead of growth and restoration, we are focusing on this mission alignment through the lens of managing efficiency and sustainability, right? Higher education is sort of a precarious spot, right? It's a come to Jesus moment at some point, but how do then we make sure as we are in basic aid that we continue to be efficient and we are sustainable from that labor perspective? My labor colleague has talked about sort of that, again, my folks are supervisors. A lot of them are frontline as well. That's all highfalutin language because at the end of the day, it's who they see in front of them, right? And so many of them choose to be here because of the type of student population we serve. Again, we have to go back to the mission. We have to talk about this from an efficiency and sustainability and how are we measuring that per the language in our mission statement of student success and educational excellence. That kind of framing in terms of suggestions or guidance from you as a board will help us, especially on the labor side, operationalize some of that for the student that comes in front of them and comes to their office on a day-to-day basis. I will say that as we think about strategic shrinkage, I do echo the need for a staffing study. It's not just what people do, it's also the how and the why, and that is not limited to just the classified staff. I would say in this case, I would also include my administrative colleagues as well, in terms of analyzing sort of the operational challenges, system bottlenecks, right? So we're looking at workload, workflow, right? Our business processes, really conducting a gap analysis, right? That would be fabulous guidance, for us to be thoughtful and really, again, supporting the unified communication strategy that is also a transparent way for labor to understand where we are making the strategic shrinkage that we need to do to manage and sustain our efficiency, and then the sustainability piece that my faculty colleagues have also expressed. So this does mean that we talk about work, right? The shift here, right? I don't have the answers, but again, guidance here. From thinking about labor in this district, from being task-oriented on the classified side to being mission-oriented. So this goes back to the communication thing. So I think that is sort of the conversation I would also like to see our district go as we enter this new chapter. And I think that's all I have to add right now, but the conversation continues.
I very much appreciate you weighing in now. We'll give you more opportunities later because as you hear more, you'll have more thoughts and or questions. I want to turn to my colleagues now and see who might have questions they want to start with. Trustee Gavatua, I know you have questions. Not that I'm calling you out, but you did say that. Okay. All right, I'll start with some questions then. So I like the 5-year timeline, right? We can take some time to think about what will look like then and make our way there, right? And make our way there will include a lot of the things we've just heard. What's sustainable for us, what can change, where do we have to bolster, where is there strategic shrinkage? Thank you for that terminology, Elaine. And it's a flexible enough time horizon where it won't feel abrupt and our aim is not to leave anyone behind as we decide what we want to do and how we want to get there. Also the comments around us having a unified messaging so that make sure we're saying the same thing, right? It's so easy to walk out of a room and think that you know what's going on until you have to say it to somebody else in the elevator or whatever. So I think it's important for us to get to something like that so that we leave the room. Maybe it's not today, maybe it's another day, with a common understanding. I was wondering, looking at what we have now on the demographics, sort of the high level demographics, if we have a demographer who does enrollment demographics for us. I came from a K-12 system, and so for us, our boundaries were pretty solid. So we could use a demographer to try and figure out what was going to happen. I'm wondering if we have the same kind of thing for us.
We have researchers, and we've been using the zip codes for the analysis. So the demographic information within district and outside district, we've been using zip codes explicitly to identify the specific population. So we do not have a demographer.
So would that analysis help us understand what we think if we did nothing to boost enrollment or suppress enrollment, what our enrollment would be in 5 years?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Okay. The question is, so demographers we used to use would tell us 5 years from now, this is what we expect your enrollment to be. And that was based on birth rates, housing being built, aging population, so that like we're 10,000 now, we expect will actually be 9,000 in 5 years because people are aging out of the system and whatever. So that's the question I have is if we naturally took our enrollment based on the demographics around us, if we have a way to know, or if we have a way to guess what our target is, because for me, it would help to know like what we think we're going to get to and how we build for that.
It's a little bit different compared to K-12 because in K-12, you are only required to take students within your service area. Whereas in community colleges, we don't have that distinction. Any student, California resident, for that matter, in San Diego or in Inland Empire, if they decide to take classes here at Foothill or De Anza, they are considered as a regular student as well. So we don't have those limitations. They can take it online, they can take it in person, they can take it hybrid. So it's a little bit hard for us to project based on demographics alone in terms of what our enrollment would look like in 5 years.
I would also add that the at both colleges have enrollment management where they're in the past have been exercising particular strategies before becoming basic aid, right?
Well, only 12% of our enrollment comes from outside the Bay Area. And so we can get our arms around the Bay Area.
Oh, within the Bay Area. I've never done it before, so I'm not sure how to do that calculation.
Well, let's give it, I don't know what to build for if I can't guess what it's going to be. So maybe we can just later on spend a little time on that.
So obviously, the closer we come to the center, if you will, the less complicated it might be. So the more we start to move from the center, I think it gets more challenging to gauge that. So that's one piece. But there's some areas of maybe more predictability, like the 0 to 18 population. We can project out in a defined region what that's going to look like for 18 years. But what we won't know necessarily who's moving in, who's moving out in that region will probably be a little more challenging to calculate as examples. And then based on our programming, who's interested, right? Because that also affects what that movement might look like, right? If we opened up a whole new program that doesn't exist right now, like a seniors program, for example, specifically just for seniors, we could probably get a whole different kind of enrollment mix. So some of that is also impacted by the program mix as we look at. But I think we can define some of that if we set on, so these are the 3 county areas. We can probably get it a little more honed in. Then if we leave it to the way we do it currently, which is the larger region, as well as we're taking people from across the state. So it'd be helpful if the board said something like, we want you to preserve a large district status, which puts a parameter around that, right? Because there is a definition for that, or we're flexible about that definition, then that changes the way we think about all of this too, all in alignment with the available resources.
Thank you.
Before we get to that, that's starting to articulate our interests. Before we get to that, you started off with some comments about the 5-year planning horizon, which I completely agree with and want to endorse. And particularly with respect to two aspects. One, the word initiative was used at one time, and I'm pleased that there is excitement and anticipation about the potential for basic aid, but also was tuned into the apprehension part and the anxiety part. And some of it was logically about workload, which can be a big problem, particularly with an initiative. But I heard out of Jim's statement and out of Elaine's statement, a slightly different emphasis, which I think is very important. And that this is less, from my perspective, an initiative and more a reconfiguration of how we execute on what we conceive to be our mission. And I think that deserves the time frame that's required, because as Elaine also emphasized, what she's really talking about is change management. It's not just a communication strategy, it's actively managing what is a profound change. And I think we need to do that thoughtfully and with intention. It is something that I think this time frame provides a good context for. So, those are two kind of more specific aspects of your comments, Terry, that I completely support.
As we do have expected outcomes in front of us, and the affirmed planning horizon was the top bullet on their list. Other comments about the planning horizon that we want to surface here?
Maybe I'll say a few words here. Thank you, Gohar, for this intense evaluation. It was quite impressive. And you too, Chris. I really, I got a big picture, and it's an excellent picture. And what I got is, of course, our aging population is going way up. The birth rates are way down. I know in San Jose, I read that 7 schools are going to be closing. So we have to think about, with that future, which, and we had some graphs that you gave us where in the last 15 years, our enrollment has steadily gone down. Yet our administrators, it's gone way up. So I can see right now, without much more discussion.
They haven't gone down in proportion to.
Well, it's just we're top heavy.
Yeah.
So we got to, that's something to think about. We also have in your report, there's 410,000 AI jobs where they're going to have to find new, AI can do those jobs, and these tech workers have to be reskilled. So that maybe is an area that we could certainly help with. Some short-term certificate programs, and that's something. I don't think we are such an excellent district. And in the data, it showed that our Silicon Valley, we are increasing our transfer, UC transfer, UC and CSU transfer. So it's really, it's very exciting. So I don't know. I feel I don't want to talk about, let's work within our district, not outside our district, outside our boards, within our board. We're doing online classes. It can go, I don't want to think that way, our borders. If you look at our borders, everyone's very wealthy. This is not the change. That's not our mission. So I don't even want to look at that. I want to look at the big picture. I want to improve the quality of what we already have. And I was thinking, we have these wonderful bachelor's programs, and I have talked to people in the statewide office. It's very difficult to expand the opportunities in those bachelor programs. You have to get teachers or professors that are skilled, and they're in the outside, get paid a lot more. And then if you increase the size of the classroom, you have to get more equipment. So unless you do categorical, so maybe that's a way we can increase the quality of our bachelor's programs. But when I talk to students and they're on waiting lists, and there's 400 on a waiting list for these key areas where they're going to get a job. That's what it's all about. It's about a job. And we can't provide that for them. So my vision, if I can say, I'd like to keep doing what we're doing, but improve the quality of what we have. And think about that top-heavy administrative, that's going to be painful for some, to change that.
I'd like to affirm the planning horizon. And I think I just started out by relooking at our mission. I think that's always important to do because it really says who we are and what we believe in. And I think we know and we are recognized for having put this in practice throughout the county. And so we should take a lot of pride in our success with students and our reputation in the Valley. And that will then ground us as we continue throughout this planning time. It is a change set of discussions. It is a change management process. And I think we are launching into that by listening to all voices. We will continue to do that. And I think this data set, Gohar, Chris, Mallory, really helps us really understand the parameters that we're working with and who we are serving and how we've been serving them. And I think continue to, bring this to us so it's current, right? Because again, within the 5-year time frame, we want to see how changes and trends go, because then that's how we will make some of our decisions. I think fundamental to, again, this change management process, I just want to reaffirm, we care about our employees. And so definitely we will be continuing to look at how do we ensure that we are competitive and that we are an employer of choice. That is important, I think, to all of us. And certainly, how do we support students? It definitely means in the classroom and beyond. And so support services, counselors, all of the housing and food insecurity efforts that we've been doing, I think those continue to be very important to the conversation and to this horizon of discussion. And let me, just kind of stop there. Then when we talk about articulating other board interests, I can come back up.
Do you want to make a comment on the planning horizon, or?
Well, I'll just also say,
Okay.
affirm the planning horizon and want to kind of plus one some of the comments that have been made by Trustee Landsberger, by Trustee Casas. Like Trustee Landsberger said, we are not just talking about a communication strategy here, although I think that is also important and something that I'll talk about under one of the next two kind of expected outcome discussions that we have. But it's also fundamentally about how do we reorient the approach that we've been taking as an institution. I think in the past few months, we've talked about this as, well, we're no longer going to be chasing enrollment. That is no longer going to be kind of the driving impetus of the district. And that is true, but there is also a second part there, which is, well, where are we going now? What is the strategy we're taking? Fundamentally, what are we about as a district? And I could not agree more with Trustee Casas, with Trustee Cheng, that to me, that means we're recommitting to the students that we do have and to the students that we serve, and really thinking critically, really thinking hard, really thinking innovatively about how do we address the challenges that they're facing. You know, if we're not chasing enrollment, how do we then look at the things that our students are dealing with that impact them in and outside the classroom, even if it goes kind of beyond what has traditionally been within the scope of a college district. Trustee Cheng mentioned housing insecurity and food insecurity. And I could not agree more that those are two very fundamental issues that, you know, while we don't traditionally think of them as classroom issues, very much impact the classroom. You know, if we have students who are coming to class on an empty stomach, they are probably not going to be able to excel to the way that they could if they were reaching their full potential. If we have students who are, you know, scrambling to make rent each month or living out of their car, those students are not going to be able to achieve their full potential. And so for me, a big priority throughout this discussion is going to be, as we have this conversation around a transition, as we reorient the strategy of our district without changing the mission of the district, how do we look at some of those challenges and how do we serve the students that we have so that they can navigate those challenges and excel inside and outside the classroom? So that's going to be kind of the recurring theme for me throughout this conversation.
I'd like to pick up on that theme. It's somehow settling to come to a place where you say, we're no longer chasing enrollment, because the structure that you have in place when you're doing that is the structure that you think you're going to need when you hit that goal. And you're reluctant to make any changes because you think I'm going to get back there. And that's going to be, I want to make sure I got all the things and I want to change anything. So being in a position where, from my perspective, 32% of our students in the district, from those that are at 40% of our students from out of our district, but in Santa Clara County, 56% of the students out of our district, but within the Bay Area, for me, that's a nice mix. We serve this valley. We produce students who go on to do great things in this valley that supports our equity and access goals. I don't have any issue with the current mix of students we have. I feel like that really gets to our goals. I agree with the basic needs. The other basic need I would say that I've seen in the 20-somethings and the late teens is the mental health needs. That's another one where you just cannot do the work if your mental health isn't healthy. So I think there's sort of a portfolio of things that make it possible for these students to do the best they can do, and that we are there to support them, and that we have a workplace that we already have where folks who are feeling really focused on the students can do that and have the tools they need to make it work. And so there's a certain beauty in to stop the hamster wheel of enrollment and say, okay, what do we think enrollment's going to look like 5 years from now? And what do we want that to do from our goals perspective? And are there things that we can do that provide more equity and more access and provide more to this valley by way of skilled labor that supports that? So I think it's very tough. I've done this in kind of work in the corporate world. And it takes a lot of trust to do it. It takes a lot of transparency and a lot of trust and a lot of inclusion. Because if you don't have those three things, folks can't see the big picture and they can't be involved in a way that we need all brains on deck. Because all brains on deck is important for this kind of thing, because we have so many different little corners in which we're doing work. So I would say that's my comments on articulate board interests, which is the second one. But anybody else before I want to ask staff what would be helpful for you from us? I see your light is on. So let me pass it to Trustee Landsberger first.
Again, I want to follow up and concur with your comments and provide some additional elaboration, because I think in addition to the openness and transparency internally, what may be called on, we may need to become much more adept at articulating to our local community, the residents of the Foothill-De Anza district, what we are, why we do what we do, and why that's important for our community. which we haven't had to do until now. I mean, the fact is that residents of the Foothill-De Anza district need the healthcare workers that we train. Residents of the Foothill-De Anza district are executives and professionals in organizations that need the technicians that we train. So again, if their companies are going to continue to be successful and profitable, and Silicon Valley suffers from a huge gap in economic equality, and we're a potential, an essential engine to helping address that problem. So for all of those reasons, we not only need to keep doing what we're doing, as you say, but we need to be able to better explain that to I hope, the small number of people who come to us and say, we're paying for all of this, so we ought to get all the goodies. That's not the way we should respond. In terms of other interests, I do think that the vacuum that's being created, at least locally, with respect to recent college-age students, could, if we approach this badly, if we aren't adept about it, create a big pressure on our enrollment, on our transfer function, which I don't think we want to do. I think we want to retain our competence and skill and superiority in terms of the transfer function. That again will probably mean it does mean looking more outside our district. But I think it also, from my perspective, I think it also requires us to put on a different lens with respect to our CTE programs. We've got 80. None of this data really shows or confirms that all of those 80 programs are well aligned with the current labor needs here, and whether or not there aren't some that are missing, that are needed, that we're not serving. So, I think that's something that I would like to see. And in addition, I think both our students are saying, and I believe employers are saying, that it's not just credits and degrees and certificates that matter. It's the actual skills that students achieve, and a lot of that is best achieved through practical experience and application. So our emphasis on apprenticeship, internships, workplace learning opportunities, and more consistently and uniformly implementing that across all of our disciplines will be part of the quality improvement that I hope we see. And we need to be overall, I think, more strategic about our workforce programs. And there's another thing in there that I wrote a note down, but I can't see it right now. So
you have time. We'll come back.
Yeah, there's 5 years worth of.
Let me open it again to the leadership tables if you have any comments or questions based on what you've just heard.
Yes, Trustee Landsberger, what really kind of I connected with what you said was like, we got to look at our programs, and we do have a process called program review. And so those are some of the things that we're talking about, like in the Sumo task force, about like, how could we look at some of the current programs? So those are some of the things that, like, what are we currently doing that could help with this, for lack of a better term, this initiative that we're talking about. So building things into what we currently do is one of the opportunities that we could do, so it doesn't look like extra work. So yeah, program review. And then, when we talk about CTE, let's not also forget about the Sunnyvale Center. And like, that is an opportunity. Just, we have programs there, but are there other opportunities that we can build in that area, considering its location? So those are some of the things that just kind of came top of mind when you folks were sharing out. Thank you.
Thank you.
When I was listening to a lot of what all of you were saying, I think there's a fundamental question that hasn't been explicitly stated yet. Who is our community? We're a community college, right? And we're talking about what our student mix is, and what we want to do, what's programs we want to support. And this is a question I brought up with some of our dance leaders a year and a half ago. Who is our community? When we're a community college, who are we serving? What does that mean? And I think that fundamentally plays into what our identity as a district and as two colleges is. And I want us to be very careful about that. I was looking at some of the data, and 47% of our district enrollment is fully online, right? Of that 47%, 78% of it is outside of our service district. So that means that, if I'm doing my math right, 37% of our enrollment is completely online and from outside our service area. What does that mean for our community? What does that mean for how our for the vitality of our campuses? What does that mean for who our students are? Do they identify with us, or are we a convenient means to an end? I want to believe that we're more than, we're specifically with respect to that last point I made. But as we talk about all this, I was a little concerned with the statement that President Godfrey said, which is, I'm happy with the mix we have of students. And I just want us to remain critical of what that mix means for the identity of our institutions. Who are we serving, and how are we serving them? I think that we've invested a lot in online education over the last several years. I think that there's a lot of questions from a number of faculty about how we can continue to do that better, how that can be more effective, if there are areas in which it's just simply not as effective. I come from an area of chemistry where there's just some of what we just can't do it online, right? So that's part of the viewpoint I bring to it. And that's something I think we need to consider, continue thinking about, is who are we providing opportunities to? And we do want to provide broad opportunities to our region. I think specifically with respect to some of the CTE pipelines that Vice Chancellor Mamajan brought up earlier. But we've got opportunity, we've got modality, we've got identity, we've got our community. And so those are, that broader question, who is our community, who are we serving, and who does that make us, is something we should be reflecting on very seriously and not get too lost in the numbers too quickly. Not just who do we want to serve, but who do we want to be in 5 years? Thank you.
Let me just respond to something I heard you say. I totally agree with that. But fully online, in my mind, fully online allows the mother with kids who's working during the day to participate no matter where she lives. I took an online class in 2024, and the other folks who were online with me were just awesome. I mean, they brought so much to the conversation, and they were in circumstances that would not let them come to a classroom. And so for me, it's access. And an access that's important, that those of us don't necessarily face that kind of an access problem, but the students that we do have, I believe do. I could be wrong, but I appreciate that.
Yeah, the discussion is absolutely great.
Absolutely,
that's at the heart, I think, of what we're talking about. Yeah.
Anything else from tables? Yes.
Was that me again?
No, Dolores. Sorry. She was making a move behind you. You
No,
can't see.
Turn it off, because otherwise I'll end up
Hey,
saying
look.
something I shouldn't. I do just a quick response, not really in a response to what Eric said, but I know that some of the classes that my colleagues teach tend to be a little more esoteric or specialized. I'll give you a personal example. I teach the history of Russia and the Soviet Union. That is a class that on occasion will not fill if it is in person. And it wouldn't even fill if it was limited to students in our service area that could take it online. But when it is extended to outside of that, I get students from a variety of different places. And exactly what you were talking about in the discussions, I have, young people who are in the military, who are interested, who are, have grandparents that are from Ukraine and want to talk about the war. I will say that the class has filled every quarter since 2022, but I don't think that has anything to do with my stellar teaching. I think it has a little more to do with other events. But I do think as we're looking at these things, and I don't disagree that the idea of looking at our service area and looking at sort of the immediate surrounding area is a good idea. And I do like seeing more people on campus and being around. I also don't want to limit access to students who truly can benefit from what we do.
Okay, thank you. I won't touch it. Yeah, just a couple points. One is I want to just really thank the board for the conversation that we're having. It's very kind, thoughtful, especially talking about equity for our students, basic needs. I'm going to coin a phrase, and that's that basic aid will hopefully help us address basic needs better. I've seen it happen at other colleges, our surrounding districts, where there's more like wraparound services for our students, and that will enable them to do better. And so I really appreciate that conversation. I think that that should be one of the key points that we're staying focused on. The other is the conversation around who is our community. I don't like to throw around a lot of business phrases, but I'm thinking about the phrase return on investment. And if our investments are human beings, then I think that we need to start thinking about like, who are we serving here, not necessarily online. Although I think that we have to maintain some online. That's just a reality these days. But I think if we are a human serving institution and we're bringing people in and thinking about, okay, if they're not in our immediate service area, then are they working in Los Altos? Are they working in Cupertino, right? Even if they live in East San Jose or something like that, right? And so I think that we kind of want to keep that in mind, because at the end of the day, I think that if we are a community college, as Eric is saying, then I think for me, our community is regional and in person. And so I think we need to kind of keep that in mind as we're thinking about program mix, modality of courses, things like that.
Thanks. I see Elaine moving for her mic.
Just pivoting slightly, I did want to add on to what I heard Trustee Landsberger say in terms of what should be a board interest in terms of the engagement from your roles into the community. And by here, I mean our service area. You all are representing a specific community as defined by our service area. These are the people that vote, right? So if we are thinking about sustainability resources, that is the community that would weigh in on whether or not we get another bond, whether or not we get parcel tax. This is not to say that this is sort of exclusive of the folks who are in Los Angeles and taking yes, we are open access. That is 100% our mission. But at the end of the day, your roles is to engage in your communities who vote for you, who hopefully will vote for us. And so, and ultimately help labor in terms of perhaps increasing in compensation, right? That's sort of the point of view I have when I sit here at these meetings. I would sort of love to engage, right, in terms of how we can also collaborate and support your roles, because I did hear Trustee Landsberger say this is slightly different than what our board has done historically, because we were not basic aid. So what does that mean then for you in terms of the board's interest in your community, as I've defined within the areas in which you are elected to represent? What are the priorities based on how the mission would be reflected and what should be prioritized?
Thank you. I'll let my colleagues respond to that, but I think Scott's moving towards his mic too. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think service area, again, open access, that's important to speak to, and then the economic benefit. I know this has been a discussion topic at previous budget town halls and some other things when the community comes, but we do provide a regional benefit for every student we help obtain a degree. They provide tax revenue for the surrounding community. I mean, we're a crucial component of that. I also I know that the term strategic shrinkage came from Elaine, but I would suggest not using that term. If I came to your house and I said, well, we need to implement strategic shrinkage here, you would probably not like it. But, you know, tailoring is nice. You fit something
Curating.
to a purpose. Yeah. You know, I think the acknowledgement that we're top heavy is something that we could analyze further based on surrounding community colleges and systems that we see. I did that years ago as a part of De Anza Classified Senate. So it would be something to recognize. The other key component was just, I think, an essential quality that you said was required was trust. I think from our recent climate survey, which, no one's quite understood how to handle, it feels like as you move further away from your direct manager, you have less and less trust. And I think that's going to be a challenge throughout this process, how you engage with the college community, how administrators do, how presidents do, and whether or not you're getting real feedback. Because I think there is very much Dolores talked about fear. There is a fear to giving honest feedback about what's going to occur. Because folks like me, historically, I don't think I live in Santa Clara, so that is outside the service area. I think many employees live outside the service area because, again, we're a regional employer, we provide regional education. So it's something to think about, but many people are fearful of retaining their income, their housing, their benefits, and so they may not engage. They may just, because of past issues too, they may not provide feedback, and I think that would not help us in determining the needs of our students as well as our employees. So something to be conscious of.
Thank you. I have my eye on the clock, and I want to make sure that you're getting the input that you're after on both sides here, both sides of the dais. So ask us questions or ask us to say more about anything that you don't feel like you're getting enough on.
So, I think Trustee Landsberg.
Well, I
wants
want to say a
something.
word or two about confirming governing conditions. I think the nature of this discussion actually highlights the importance of us continuing to put a premium on effective shared governance, not just the processes of shared governance, but genuinely high quality, effective shared governance, and a collaborative problem-solving orientation towards labor relations. Constructive engagement with our labor partners so that we're defining and solving problems rather than taking positions and seeing if, who can impose whose will on whom. And hopefully that we get to the point where, just to pick one example, we can become creative about how we apply the 50% law, because the 50% law is going to be an impediment to having basic aid address basic needs. Let's just be clear about it. So if that's something we want to do, I think we want to do that. And we also want to continue to adhere to the 50% law. We're going to have to get creative. So, that's an example of how I hope both our labor relations and our shared governance continue to be a focus.
Just react. Didn't I see today come out from the foundation? So just in terms of getting outreach and more input from our community at large through our alumni base, I think a survey that went out from our foundation. Okay. So some more data at least will be good.
So let me return to the question of what else
So let me,
questions you have for us. What do you need from us?
So let me just share some preliminary thoughts with the board and for our colleagues in the audience as well. We have plans to do an external community forum. So we want to invite the community into dialogue with us. We'll probably do that as we move into the new calendar year. So once we have a little more input internally, so that way we can get a better gauge on and help the community understand some of these bigger picture issues, right? Because it's not as simple as only serve the people in our service area, right? You want nurses, you want, automotive technicians to work on your car, the list, right? It ain't going to happen if we only pay attention to our district. So that's why we think that's important to do that. And so we'll work with you to arrange for when that will happen. Also, It's going to be a challenge to thread, not adding more into the plate. This is the single biggest thing of importance over the next 5 years for this institution, right? So we have to not lose sight of that too. How we carefully curate all of this is going to be critical because it sets us up for that long-term sustainability that will be essential as we go forward. So I want us not to lose sight of that. So maybe we need to peel some other things off so that this can be more of the central focus of what we do. And that's something we can talk about, right? But remember, a lot of the planning work that's already happened doesn't have to go away. It helps to guide and focus some of the kinds of conversations that we have. And then it's about a more strategic alignment because we're, trying to carefully thread a lot of different interests, but we can't meet all those interests either. And that's why I asked the question. So now I'm going to go into a question. So to the degree that it's of importance in terms of either from an interest perspective or from even a governing condition perspective, and sometimes the two nuance in there, do you want us to remain a large district, or are you more open to that? Meaning being less than a large district. So the state defines what a large district is, because that starts to help us think about the strategic alignment piece and weighing and balancing, threading all the different interests. So that's my first question.
And what's the definition of large district?
The definition of a large district is basically on resident full-time equivalent students. Any district with 20,000 or more resident FTEs per year is considered large. Between 10,000 and 20,000 resident full-time equivalent students, that's a medium-sized district. And any district that is less than 10,000 FTEs per year is considered a small district.
I'll build on that question. Can you talk a bit more about what does it mean from your perspective as the administration operationally, and then we can take that and have a conversation about what it means from a principal standpoint, but what does it mean? What would it look like to make that shift?
I'll have Christopher answer and then I'll follow up with that.
So on a ed code perspective, it doesn't mean anything. You're a district, whether you're 1,000 FTS or 30,000 FTS.
No, it does mean something for categorical funding, doesn't it?
Yes.
Not on
not
the
completely.
category. It's based on the total full-time equivalent students. Yes, on the categorical, there is a value for being big, but not the designation of being large, small, or medium. But in terms of the actual number of students that you have, there is an implication on our categorical programs because most of our categorical programs are based on the number of resident FTEs that you have. Example, strong workforce, student equity and achievement program, even the deferred maintenance or scheduled maintenance money that we get from the state is based on full-time equivalent students. So the bigger you are, you get a little bit more money from the state because it's based on those formulas. But in terms of the designation of large versus medium versus small, it's a debate between the 73 districts, but there is reputation and stature of being a large district. You have more clout at the state level. That is the reason why from the beginning, Foothill-De's voice is up there. One of the highly respected one. When somebody speaks from Foothill-De, people listen because they know there is a reputation behind that. The other piece is it justifies being a multi-college district because most multi-college districts are large districts, except our neighbors here because we're basic aid. But for the most part, it justifies the rationale of being a multi-college district because of being large. But again, that's a debate because there are some large districts that are single college. Mount San and Mount Sac. Mount Sac is one example of those. El Camino is the other. Yeah. We are large.
We are large.
There are only two large districts in the Bay Area. It's Contra Costa and Foothill-De. The rest are medium, and all the other multi-college districts are medium-sized districts.
And that's why I asked that question. because it affects how we plan and the strategies we develop. Now, obviously, I think it goes back to President Godfrey's point, right? What's the market potential that we have by understanding the enrollment potential, right? Because that's a whole nother layer in all of this, because if the numbers are dropping, irrespective of what we want to do, we may not be able to maintain a certain level regardless. And so that's why you've seen the data, right? Numbers have been dropping almost steadily over the last decade or more. And so that's kind of outside of our control to a point. And so there's probably some of that we can anticipate continuing to happen, right? That softening just because of what we're seeing. But then you can offset that by refocusing some of your program mix. So if we did more focus on seniors, we know they want to come to take programming here, but they're probably not going to want to come and take degree programming. And so that means more smaller, those kinds of mixes, but then to free up the resources to do that, you got to take it from somewhere else. So that's why all of these things are important, right?
And there's no repeatability. So
there's no
that's a
repeatability,
problem.
which also
That's a
affects that,
problem.
right? Which, by the way, is also why our enrollments have dropped. And why don't you just hit some examples of it? Because there's other drivers that have affected the enrollment numbers of the district.
That is correct. I think two of the biggest things that happened within the last decade that really have an impact to enrollment, and not just for us, but for all community college districts, is one, repeatability in 2013, if I remember correctly. And then the other one is AB 705, 1705, wherein we are no longer allowed to offer basic skills classes, English and math. I think there's another program, English, math, and ESL to offer as a requirement for taking college level classes. And those are big swings in our enrollment that really affected everybody.
I just want to add one comment to give a little bit of perspective. And this is not verified, or I don't even know if it's true, but I remember being really concerned a couple years ago with the enrollment drop of our district, and talking to people statewide, and the discussion was maybe they'll close some, just like K through 12 has classroom or school closures, we may start seeing community college closures. And I was concerned because we have Foothill-De and our enrollments going down. And I talked to Judy Minor, our former chancellor, and she says, Laura, you don't have to worry about that, because our district combined is more than, our district has more enrollment than combined enrollment of the surrounding districts. I don't know if that's true, but it made me think our district, people come here, students come here because of the quality, because they graduate. It's prestigious. And I remember talking to, at that time, he was, Supervisor Simidian. He said to me, Laura, not all community colleges are created equal, but Foothill-De Anza, you are top notch. So I think we have to just remember that we're a really good institution. We do really good work for our community being, I would say, it's regional community. And if we just, we have to think about that. The people that work, our employees, do an amazing job for our students, and let's continue doing that.
So just to clarify, to make it based on 24-25 enrollment numbers, resident FTEs, I'm not going to name the two other multi-college districts in Santa Clara County because we know them. If you add their total enrollment together, it's equal to Foothill-De Anza.
So with respect to the large district, medium district, small district, I would love to hear from the folks on the ground if they have an opinion about what we ought to be. But what strikes me is I would not want to say I want to be a large district if it meant that we were trying to attract students that aren't in our core mission. So I don't want to, offer cotillion or something. But I don't know what it means to the folks who are actually in the classroom or supporting our students, if it makes a difference, if we're medium or large. Because I don't think we're going to get to small. So the question is a little bit above or a little bit below 20,000. Anybody? Anybody?
I will, oh, I'm sorry, may I?
Yes, there you are.
More of a wondering, right? So I think through all the sessions I've been sitting with Vice Chancellor De La Rosa, we are the only, well, historically, we've been only apportionment district in the Santa Clara and San Mateo County area. Is that correct?
Minus Gavilan.
Minus Gavilan, correct. And so when we look at that, like, okay, you have all these basic aid districts around us. And so where do those students go? I would argue that they would come here. And so as we go to basic aid, what might that mean for us? Where do those students go? Because historically, if those students were maybe shut out of those other colleges, oh, well, Foothill, they'll open up another section, or there's classes over there. So if we do what other districts have done, where do they go? What does that do to our enrollment? And so I don't know, it's more of a wondering. I don't know if I'm not landing on anything, but that's just what's kind of percolating in my head. Those students have always had a place to go. And so now as we go with basic aid, like where do they go now in the Bay Area? Who are we, who's gonna serve them? And I don't know if that's something that we think about when we think about, is that something that we want to think about as we look at this large district question?
And my wondering, similarly, when it said that we offer nearly 500 programs and certificates, and then we offer over 80 CTE programs, I was thinking, how does that compare with what else is being offered in the nearby regions, and how do they choose us? Maybe the 500 does that. What's behind these 500 programs for us in our offerings? So yeah, those are my wonderings too, as we talk about how do we kind of right size or tailor where we need to land.
Also, just to put an additional context that I mentioned earlier, in comparing ourselves with all the other 8 community supported districts, because we're the 9th community supported district, there are only 2 large districts, South Orange and Foothill-De.
And the other part to keep in mind about that, when you look at it from a budget perspective or revenue perspective, of those, only one other is a comparator from a revenue standpoint, not the number of students you serve, and that's West Valley Mission.
That is correct.
And so their margin, as you saw, right, per student is way higher than what ours is. So that may also account for why our employees feel overwhelmed, because we don't have the same cushion, if you will. So how do we thread that as well? Because if we want to re-examine class size and things like that to kind of balance this off, that starts to affect this, what's the actual size of the institution. And then if we want to compensate better, then that also affects that size question. And again, that's by us planning into this. However, there's the wild card, and that is, what is the external market going to do, right? Because we have already seen the numbers climbing down as well.
Well, I kind of want to expand on your putting the question out there, and in particular, curious to hear from, Jim and Scott and Elaine on this question of going from a large district to a medium district, right, as the next level down. Does that raise any questions? What would that mean to the folks that you represent that we should be keeping in mind when we have that conversation?
Yeah, I'll just, from my perspective, it's a bit of a strange question. It's like, what size pants do you want to fit into? Like, it really depends on what you do and what you consume and your activities. Largely when we make these decisions, it may not be up to us. I mean, there are only so many students we can enroll. It does depend on if we have a narrow definition of service area or, the right definition of service area. And again, in recognition of the, what we provide, I think, again, a lot of people, despite being overworked at times, we still feel good about the work that we do. And so slimming down or choosing some arbitrary, say if we were to choose small, I mean, that would feel fairly vicious in some areas. Like people would not feel as though their labor had meaning and purpose. And I think if you were to just arbitrarily choose one range, that's the danger you run into. But much of it revolves around the actual decisions we make. You know, there was some discussion about dual enrollment and whether we continue that and whether it fits with certain goals. But it's, you know, it has a great impact to the community. It has an impact on the students. I mean, we recognize that it does something, and it connects people with the college. So to cease that activity, it would be painful, I think, for the community and for the employees who provide that service. And I don't know. And the pain does not stay narrow. People talk. You know, there is this game of telephone. We all talk to each other, what we're feeling. And that's where, you know, that unified communication, having a picture of the road ahead. You know, I talk to folks in my own role about just telegraphing moves. You know, it's just when something happens, means, okay, you know, our folks are going to start showing up to Board of Trustees meetings. Just so you know, if you're going to make this choice, we file a grievance, we do this. So I don't let it remain a mystery. And I think that's part of the issue with this process, is that there are so many things left undecided, and that's where we're looking for some guidance about what things are going to look like. But maybe that question just about size, it'll just be a product of the choices we make. And so I think what we're looking for perhaps is just a picture of what those choices are going to look like, what we continue to do, what we cease to do, and then we'll find our size, and it'll come to us naturally.
I agree with my labor colleague here in terms of this conversation about the size of the district. I think, yes, philosophically, we can have a conversation, but it does not exist in a vacuum. There are real dollar sign implications related to this, of which I think one of the things we've already discussed at other board meetings in terms of what would be the amount that would be available to support per FTES, right? I think Chancellor has already referenced, you know, one of our neighboring basic aid districts in terms of the amount of FTES, right? So if you continue to, for example, recommend that it be a large district, there are implications to that. And then it's a conversation about what is in the board's interest, right? It would diminish sort of like how much dollars per FTES we can allocate. I think it's sort of thinking about however you define community. I mean, I have a specific way because of my hat, but I heard from the board tonight, regional. Okay. So what are the priorities in terms of if we think we are a good regional contributor, right, to our regional community, to our community? What is that? What are we doing, right? And I guess I echo sort of what my faculty colleague has referenced in terms of return on investment. How would we measure that we are doing a good job? And then I think, you know, is it because we are focusing on workforce? Is it because we ensure that there are direct, I don't know, academic pathways to, I mean, we can go down the rabbit hole to this, but what would be elements you could bring into your areas, right, within our service area to say, we are serving our regional community well, and you should continue to be proud. And I don't know that that's defined by the size of our district.
So I went to a really small undergraduate institution, and we had a ballroom dance club. And then I went to UC Davis for graduate school, and they had a salsa club, and a K-pop club, and a West Coast swing club. And you see what I'm saying here, right? With size comes a diversity of community, right? And that's the benefit of being larger. We're going to have so many more students and faculty and administrators and classified. Like, you've just got more people there. You have a greater diversity of interest and talent. The flip side of that is one, you know, well, the two flip sides is the external market pressures. Can we do that? How long can we do it for regardless? And if you shrink, you know, if that's the direction we go, you have more money to do fewer things better, right? So do we want to do a lot of things, or do we want to do fewer things and do them, potentially do them better and have more to invest in those fewer things? And that, I think, is where people get very nervous, right? We can come back to that first response you asked first. What are we hearing? As we talk about this right sizing, am I the thing that's going to not be there? Am I the thing that's going to move to the other campus? Right. And that's where the nervousness is. So there's not an easy answer to do we want to be large or not? Because one, we don't know if we can control it. And you've got those two very valid things to balance. Do we want to have a broader diversity of interest and opportunities, or do we want to be able to support a smaller number more effectively?
I think everybody agrees with Elaine's labor colleague.
And Jim, I see you bring her up.
We're just going to start calling you that from now on.
I agree with a lot of what I'm hearing here. I think that we have kind of competing interests, as the chancellor has mentioned, and it's sort of like we have like branding that we already have, you know, De Anza's Tops and Transfer, and we have all these great CTE programs. At the same time, I go back to my statements about sustainability, right? It's like we can't have it all. Can't have our cake and eat it too. We have to kind of make, you know, if we're not going to call it strategic shrinking, but I mean, thinking about how that's going to look, right? And I think that's something that comes down to, you know, Chris's area, which is like, what do our receipts look like? What do our numbers look like that we're able to kind of work with going forward? I think that we're still waiting to see in some ways, like maybe in the fall, what those are going to come back with. And I think that we do owe at least some thinking about, as a political science person, like now that we're focused more on our communities and that funding model, it's like, you know, what value are we bringing our immediate communities? Does that mean that we have more non-credit classes? Does it mean we have more senior type classes? Does it mean we have quarterly newsletters that we're sending out to folks? Is the communication piece, right? And so I think that all has to be kind of top of mind, as well as thinking, well, what do we really want to lean into? We want to keep some of the things that we're good at. We want to stay tops and transfer. And I think faculty and staff are proud of that. At the same time, it's like, how do we make it so it's, again, we're sustainable, that we don't, you know, people I think are working really harder than, I mean, I've talked to my colleagues around the state and I tell them like, oh yeah, I gotta get on these calls on Saturday or Sunday. They're like, what are you talking about? Like, you work way more than we do at X college, right? And so I think that we have to think about that too. So that balance has to be there.
Eric, did I see you move towards your mic?
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thought. We were talking about growing or shrinking. Another way to build that gap is to just not grow, right? So if we stay a large district, but we don't get any bigger, eventually there's more property tax dollars. So I don't know if ultimately, I might be simplifying the
There's
dollars.
also categoricals. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
And
but-
expenses may escalate faster.
And
than
yeah,
probably.
I may be oversimplifying. Again, he's the expert over there. He can
But-
tell me any of you can tell me I'm wrong.
And you
But-
run the risk when you're new into basic aid of tipping back over out of basic aid, right? So when you stop chasing enrollment, but you tip back into SCIF, that can be rough. So, you know, Vice Chancellor De La Rosa is keeping a very close eye on where we are, because tipping back into the other, you know, changes our numbers. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the case.
Yeah, just to clarify, so as you continue to grow, your excess revenue shrinks and shrinks. That would tip you back to the student-centered funding formula apportionment based, especially when the COLA given by the state is higher than the increase in property taxes. So for example, for 26-27, if it materializes that the state is going to pass on 4.31% COLA in the student-centered funding formula, and our property tax only grows by 4%, then that would shrink the excess revenue piece, since we're really, as I'm going to borrow the words from President Whalen, we're in baby basic aid status so far. So we don't have that big cushion compared to our neighboring districts wherein they've been basic aid for more than a decade and they have like $40 million, $50, $60 million of their revenue considered excess revenue because they've been in basic aid for a long time. We want to be where South Orange is at some point. It's about $130 million of revenue considered excess revenue. That's probably 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah, but we're not there yet. So we can't, it's signing up all those $130 million that we don't have. Other comments? Walter?
Yes, so when I look at our mission at Foothill College, we're thinking about serving diverse learners. And so I really think about like, well, I look at the data pack and it's like, well, a great proportion of our students who identify as Asian, Black, and Filipinx and Latinx are Black and Brown students. They're from outside of the district. And so how do we reconcile that? And I think those are questions that those are guiding questions that we always need to ask ourselves, and like looking, how do we stay mission aligned, but also how do we best serve our most vulnerable populations? Thank you.
Just to add more food to thought here is in terms of perhaps one way to think about this is how does our district add to the engine of economic mobility, right, as the overarching priority? What programs fit into that? Who benefits from that? What students enroll from that? And I don't want to limit that just to the students. I would also like for us to consider this broader umbrella of economic mobility for our employees and specifically classified, right? We, again, no disrespect to faculty and administrative colleagues, but really the classified group is on that pathway, just like our students, right? So where is the economic mobility? How are we defining that for staff in addition to students? And if we can clarify what that interest is for the board, right, and the communities you serve, whether it be your area or the region, that might open up sort of an avenue for rich discussion for us that can balance sort of what my colleague Voltaire just stated regarding, we have students we know are disproportionate impact. They are not being certain. They come here, right? So they come here with intention. Our mission is open access and to elevate folks, but through the pathway of economic mobility. And so it becomes less sort of focused on specific students and where they live, but how we contribute that in a regional way.
Excellent. Yes. What else? What else? What other questions have we not touched on? We didn't touch much on the governance points. Trustee Landsberger did, but I agree with what he said. So unless there's other things on that. Okay. Anything else?
To seniors, because again, I'm just curious, we know that that's a growing part of our, again, population. We know other districts are actually reaching out to them. Any thoughts on that for us?
I think it's great.
As a senior.
No, but I mean, seriously, and
As a
I
senior.
think that really speaks to community, right? I mean, that's where we're seeing some of the drive. Seniors vote a lot, right? So when you talk about, do we need another, see, I got his attention, right? So when you talk about like, who's going to fund our next bond, who's going to make, support us, I think providing those opportunities to our community and repeatability is absolutely 100% of the challenge. And there's some ways we can address that through non-credit. It's not a panacea, but there's some options there that we're exploring.
Change
But
the
yeah,
title of the course.
I am happy to have a many hour-long conversation about the things we have done in curriculum to address that. But yeah, no, I think it's good, is the short answer.
I see Elaine grabbed her mic first and then Jim. Okay, Jim, Elaine's deferring to you. Could you put your finger up?
I didn't see Elaine. Yeah, I agree on that point. I was thinking maybe, it sounds like that's already in motion, but maybe like, community forum surveying what folks would like to see from our district in terms of offerings or what have you. I also think that bringing people in and having, them be part of those conversations would be great so that we begin to see what the needs are and see what they'd like to see from us. Maybe looking at other districts that have been basic aid longer. What types of things, what does that community engagement look like?
Thanks.
I would also encourage us to think about the, I guess, the adult learning population, not as a monolith, right? I mean, we talk about adult learners. We should people over a certain age, right? But again, if we were to apply the frame of economic mobility, there are adults over a certain age who have not benefited from the economic conditions of our region. So how I would think about it, right, in terms of then what would we offer, right? Yes, and we should still ask people. I mean, but how would that fit through the lens of economic mobility? Are there folks who need second careers? Are there folks who can't sustain their standard of living based on where they are at? And how can the courses that we offer here provide pathways of economic mobility? And that would have to be probably defined slightly differently than for our traditional age college student. But that's again what I would sort of think about the framing. So yes, these are still important population groups, but where is sort of the focus? I think that's part of this conversation we're having today. It's not really not doing things we're doing, but where do we provide some more intentional focus, at least for now, right? Until we can become South of $30 million, right, in our coffers.
Yeah, our mission gives us a lens.
Yes.
And it's the lens through which we should look. Eric, and then looks like Dolores has her hand up.
Scott was first.
Scott, sorry. Somebody over here
Yeah,
had a
I was
hand up.
just on the subject
it's
of
Voltaire.
seniors in classes. I was going to ask, I don't think any of our classes have an age restriction or limit or anything else. Like if the seniors wanted to be here, they would be here for these classes. To Elaine's point, just to say that I'm a proud product of ITT Technical Institute, which no longer exists, but it did provide me at the time to take classes after 5 o'clock. So I had a job prior to Foothill-De College, where I worked for 6 years, a wonderful place called usedlaptops.com, which no longer exists, but that's where I got my employment and education. But it was a significant benefit because I did go to San Jose City College, and I was not able to get classes that filled within the work schedule that I had to meet the demands to pay for the bills that I had, the interest that I had. So it is structuring our college to serve that population of adult learners or working individuals. So anyone with a job who cannot come here during our usual service hours would be something perhaps that our community and the surrounding community would appreciate. So, I'm grateful to those colleges or even ITT only because it allowed me to pursue my degree and then come here to this wonderful employer and place and be here with you this evening.
We appreciate that.
As a senior in the community, not this community, but one down the road, because I can't afford to live in Los Altos Hills. I do agree that what Scott's talking about having classes and targeting those populations, I think is really important. I don't think it's that they don't want to come here. I think it's that they don't know to come here. And I do think that part of that is a lot of the populations in our service areas, and I'm going to be, as I am known to be, somewhat blunt, who have parents who think that community college is something you do if you're not smart. And we have been fighting that image for decades, but I will tell you that as somebody who attended, God help me, a private all-girls Catholic school where I wore a plaid skirt on work scholarship, I would like to add, I cleaned the faculty lounge for the privilege of attending that school. We were told that community colleges were not the types of schools we went to. And so when you think about that mindset, you think about the communities that surround our colleges, we're not necessarily getting those students. And the reason I know that is they all take my summer classes so they can get their GE credit for less money when they're living at home. And so as we're talking about targeting, I think De Anza's tops and transfer, I think Foothill's program about UCLA and our transfer successes there, all of those things need to be more readily advertised and put out there. But do we also talk about the Laura Cassises who are stuck driving their child to academically talented youth programs in the summer and are like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this 2-hour block. Oh, they're going to take a class from a part-time faculty member who happens to now be your district academic senate president. But if we look at those kinds of things, we look at the fact that we don't have to worry about the apportionment, I believe, Chris, around CDCP non-credit. So we don't have to worry about that with non-credit anymore. We can start looking at focusing more on those types of programs that draw people in. And then we've got those populations. And one of the great things like about our Faculty Engagement Institute was that our students transitioned out of that non-credit program into our child development program, into our credit program. And they brought their families in. So I think that the communication piece that Elaine has mentioned and that Scott has mentioned, that needs to be better. And we're not doing a fabulous job of that right now. And I want us to do better at it before I retire, which is very soon. No, I'm just kidding.
Let me just react to one little bit of that. The trustee area, I'm trustee area 5. We have 2 high schools in our trustee area. Foothill is the #1 college our graduates go to.
From which area?
Palo Alto. I'm Palo Alto, Stanford. Gunn High School and Palo Alto High School, the #1 college students go to directly out of high school is Foothill College.
Can I ask a question?
Uh-huh.
Do we know that they enroll or do they say they're going to enroll?
I didn't ask them all personally.
No, those are actually the numbers. The problem is it's 15% maybe from Palo Alto Unified, and it's 20 or 25% in Mountain View, Los Altos, of Fremont Union High School District.
Nonetheless,
So-
they know it's a path and they come.
Yeah, no, that'd be the interesting point
It's-
because I've heard the same thing like from state center colleges that they, 90% of their students come from their local high schools and it's nowhere near that number, but they enroll all of them automatically or they allow them all entrance. And then how many of them actually end up coming is a different number. So it'd be good to find that out.
They come
and see what
They
those
do
numbers
come.
are.
I mean, the way they track it at the school is where people enroll and go. Anyway, I just wanted to say that my trustee area is a big fan. Voltaire, did you have your hand up, or Eric, did you have your hand up? Who had a hand up over there?
I just had a real quick note that the flip side of this, and I think Dolores started to tag onto this, is that dual enrollment piece, right? That's the other place where we capture an audience that we're not serving as much as we could. And then they do identify as community college students. And then maybe more of them do go to community college because I see all the smart people and the individual attention. So that's the other side.
But that's one where I think we are vulnerable if we continue to do a lot of dual enrollment out of our district. I think that is a potential flashpoint. So if we do it, it needs to be for a very good and well-articulated reason.
Yeah.
I know Simon Pennington, he's done a lot of work in Palo Alto on dual enrollment. It's really.
But they're within
wonderful.
district, right? So,
Yeah.
all right. We are a little past our target time, but I don't want to cut us short on any interesting things to say. Go.
Sorry. One of the things that probably is unspoken because of our great technology sector that we have here in the Bay Area is the ageism that's involved, ageism that's involved in the tech sector. So I do often see, and this is just my experience, that I do see a lot of students that I'm being pushed out of my industry. And so I'm coming back to take a class. So, I mean, I've had PhD, MIT graduates in my class. And it's like, why are you here? Introduce yourself. It's like, there's ageism that exists in the tech sector that no one really wants to talk about. And so I just want to highlight that that's something that is evident, that is being experienced, and is that something that we address as we look at diverse learners.
Well, and as Trustee Casas said earlier, just the number of jobs being sucked up by AI means we'll have an ever-growing population of people who want to retrain.
That's right. My son he was laid off. Yep. He's a computer programmer.
Trustee Vatva.
Yes, I want to bring the conversation back to Lee and the administration, because I think we are throwing a lot at you. But I also want to make sure that, this session is not just, all of us talking, but that you are getting clear direction from the board, clear feedback from folks about what we want this process to look like. So I want to make sure and ask you, are you getting that? Are there specific questions or points of direction and guidance that you want to get from us before we walk out of here?
So the answer is yes. Because, those 3 main things we wanted, what we heard, because the board didn't vote, but an affirmation of the 5-year piece is clear. I think a lot of the interests came out in the conversation from everybody. So we have that and we'll call that into the process. And we probably just need to sharpen up on the governing conditions side of things. And then we'll come back and share all of that with the board and with everybody, as well as we use that to start shaping what a process would look like. So yes, we have a lot to work with tonight, and we'll look to see how we start to prioritize and weigh all that out. So thank you very much. Hopefully we met the board's expectation about this conversation as well.
I want to add one more quick thing. Because I mentioned at the start, there was this question about communications, and Trustee Landsberg raised the point, it's not just communications, it's this broader point. And I said, I agree, but I will talk about communications in a little bit. A little bit was a little longer than anticipated, but I guess I want to elevate this question of how we talk about this transition to students, to staff. I'm hearing a lot of trepidation from staff on what this transition might mean. And so, again, not really a question or direction, but just a thought that I'm sharing is I'm hoping that when we have that conversation, as we start to bring in faculty, staff, and students, we are keeping that conversation really rooted in who we are as a district. We're not just talking about nickels and dimes. We're not just talking about fiscal implications, as are all important, but ultimately it comes back to what we're here to do. Elaine's labor colleague shared how many of the the fact that so many of the people who work at this district could be making better money, could be working less strenuous hours somewhere else. They're here because they believe in the mission, and that's something that really speaks to me. I know it speaks to a lot of folks here, and so I think it's really important when we're having those conversations with our staff, faculty, workers. We are rooting it in that. We're having this conversation about how we fulfill our mission as a district to our students, to the people who work with us, who make that mission possible. So just something I want to elevate as those conversations get started.
Anything else before I gavel us out? Going once? Going twice? We're adjourned.
Good, great discussion.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Oh, well, I wish you all the best.
Thanks. Yeah, so I will miss graduation as well. Yes, I'll be back. I'm coming back Friday night. Yeah, that's where I was. I think it's. Okay. Yeah. See you there. And it's, usual place, conference room.
Yes, that's the only place.
Yeah, it really is.
The Latino graduation is at the football field. That's what I thought. Yeah, because there's no room.
Yeah, it's good.
It's nice.
Yeah.
It was nice. And it was not as hot. So.
Felt okay for those of us under the, but I felt like the people in the audience were a little bit hot. Yeah.
I've been on that field when it's been awful. People have seen it.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah,
You're kidding.
We'll be there on Saturday.
Okay.
So.
Okay. I'm dressed light.
Dress light. Yes.
Question. We need to talk about that. There's an expectation to continue to grow.
I think that, yeah, for my comment.
Yes, because
We just
they
wanna
had.
make
Just like, it's part of the strategy.
Global
We're growing
citizenship.
international. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
For sure.
for
And they don't cost us
facilitating that.
extra?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hope you got what you need. Deanna. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, so in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna have a training on Boardable, the new board management software. We're
Oh, wow, that
transitioning
sounds
to.
fun.
It's.
I feel like I have cramps. I can't come.
It'll be like online. It'll be like 2x2.
Okay.
By 1 or something like that. Just giving you a heads up. It's not a one-to-one like sort of thing. Meaning everything that Board Docs does, this does not do. Okay. So just preparing you that you might have to go even like a little bit slower at the beginning, as my muscle memory on this system is very different on the motions and like recording them. And they're trying to work with us to build it out the way we want them to. We're having to build out a lot on our back end. Get all of our users that build the agenda, like using it, and it's difficult. But we like this vendor, so we're like willing to like work through it. So we're meeting with them like constantly. We're working. So it's still been a lot, but I just wanted to give you that.
On a unrelated topic, it just reminded me. So when we were together last time, we took a motion and we added to it. And I know I caught you off guard by asking you to type it. And the reason I had asked was to make sure that we're actually voting on what's written down.
Yes.
And so I don't know if there's a way you can do that for us in the future. Not that it happens very often, right?
Yeah.